My father refused to walk me down the aisle because his favorite daughter threw a housewarming party that he deemed more important than my wedding. But this decision opened a box of family secrets that changed everything I thought I knew about my past. I never quite understood why, since childhood, I felt so out of place in my own family. Perhaps it was the fact that my older sister, Emily, was the planned child, as my parents made a point of repeating. Emily was not satisfied with being the favorite. She made it her mission to erase any trace of value I might have. She spread lies about me to school friends, manipulated situations to make me look guilty, and as a teenager even physically assaulted me. The reaction from my parents? Silence. Or worse, justifications for her behavior. She's stressed, or you know how competitive your sister is. Words that cut deeper than any physical aggression. I, on the other hand, was the accident, a tolerated presence but never celebrated. This perception shaped my relationship with them from an early age, creating a void that was only filled by the genuine love of my grandparents. My grandparents were my safe haven amidst the storm. While Emily was placed on a pedestal, they saw me, listened to me, and welcomed me. But at home, things were different. It took an intervention from Child Protective Services to change anything. Emily's aggression crossed a line and a report was made, not by my parents, but by a neighbor who heard the screams that night. I still remember the social worker's visit, how my parents were more concerned with protecting Emily's image than defending me. It was at that moment that my grandparents made a decision that saved my life. They took me to live with them. Leaving that house was both a relief and a pain. I didn't want to abandon my parents, but how could I stay in a place where I was never truly accepted? My grandparents taught me the meaning of unconditional love, something I had never fully experienced before. This was the first time I severed ties with my parents and with Emily, but I knew that sooner or later they would try to come back. And when that happened, I needed to be ready. Moving to my grandparents' house was like entering a completely different world. There were genuine laughter, dinners around the table where everyone participated, and a sense of belonging that I had never felt before. Despite this, the impact of the wounds left by years of neglect and favoritism was still present. I dreamed of reconciliation, but also feared the possibility of reliving everything. My parents, however, were far from making any effort to correct the past. On the contrary, their narrative was clear. They victimized themselves, saying that I had chosen to abandon the family, while continuing to support Emily in all her decisions, often irresponsible ones. She, in turn, seemed more satisfied than ever to occupy the role of the ideal daughter, while I was relegated to the role of the ungrateful one. Even with my grandparents' affection, the shadow of my family still loomed over me. When I turned 18, I was invited to Emily's wedding. I hesitated. My memories were still filled with hurt, but a part of me thought that maybe this was the moment when something would change. Perhaps upon seeing me again, my parents would finally understand how they had hurt me and try to mend things. But that hope quickly dissipated. Attending the wedding was a surreal experience. From the start, it was clear that I was there as a secondary figure. Emily looked radiant, but she completely ignored me throughout the ceremony. My parents barely spoke to me either. At the reception, during a toast, my father made sure to highlight how Emily was an exemplary daughter, while casting glances that seemed to say I was the family shame for not following in her footsteps. The final straw came when, at the end of the party, Emily made a point of confronting me. Under the guise of a smile, she shot, "Thanks for coming, but you know this doesn't change anything, right? You'll never be part of anything as important as this." My heart ached. I returned home that night with the certainty that, no matter how much I wished for it, reconciliation would not be possible. It was then that I decided I needed to build my own life, away from that toxic dynamic. I focused on my studies, worked hard, and little by little, gained my independence. In the midst of this, I made true friendships that taught me the value of being loved for who I am, not for who others expect me to be. I met James in one of those friend circles. He was everything I never imagined I could have, kind, patient, and above all, willing to listen to me. For the first time, I felt I had a genuine partnership. When James proposed to me, I knew this was a new chance to redefine what family meant to me. My grandparents were overjoyed and supported me in every detail of the preparations. My parents, however, upon hearing the news, did something I didn't expect. They tried to reconnect. They asked to be involved, arguing that family is family, and that it would be disrespectful not to include them. Reluctantly, I agreed to have a conversation with them. It was my chance to express how I felt, but as usual, they quickly minimized my pain. "You've always been so sensitive," my mother said. "Emily was never to blame. You two are just different." My father added, "That was years ago. You need to get over it." I knew then that their intention was not a sincere apology, but rather to ensure they wouldn't be excluded from something socially significant. The peak of this tension came when, during the final wedding preparations, Emily announced she would be throwing a housewarming party on the same day as my wedding. What seemed impossible happened. My parents chose to attend her event instead of coming to my wedding. On the day of the ceremony, as I walked down the aisle arm in arm with my grandfather, I felt a mix of sadness and relief. Sadness because, despite everything they had done, I still wished they were there. Relief because I knew I was finally closing this chapter of my life. In that moment, I realized that family is built on bonds of love, not blood. After the wedding, the absence of my parents didn't weigh as heavily as I had imagined. Being surrounded by the people who truly mattered, my grandparents, James, and our friends, brought a sense of wholeness that I had never felt before. But, as always, the past found a way to reach me. A few days after the ceremony, I received an email from Emily, a surprisingly conciliatory era, completely out of character for her. "I believe we made mistakes in the past," the message said, "and maybe it's time to put that behind us. I would like to meet you to talk and, who knows, start over." It was strange, but something inside me wanted to believe that this was possible. I showed the message to James, who, knowing the backstory, suggested caution. "If it's sincere, you'll realize it in the moment, but don't hurt yourself again trying to force something." I replied to the email, accepting the invitation to meet at a local cafe. On the scheduled day, I waited for almost an hour, but Emily never showed up. Instead, later I found out that the message hadn't been written by her. When I called my mom to confront her, she confessed, "Your dad and I thought that maybe this would help you two reconnect." It was just another manipulative attempt to control the narrative and erase the consequences of their choices. That hit me hard. Not only did I feel betrayed again, but their attitude confirmed what I feared. Nothing had changed. I spoke to my therapist about the incident, and he helped me realize that continuing to seek their approval was like chasing something unattainable. I needed to set definitive boundaries. As I processed all of this, an unexpected twist brought new challenges. My grandparents, who had always been the foundation of my world, began facing health issues. My grandfather, who was already in his 80s, suffered a minor stroke, and my grandmother was struggling with the onset of dementia. Seeing them, once so strong and wise throughout my life, now facing the fragility of age broke me in ways I wasn't prepared for. With James by my side, we took on the responsibility of caring for them. I juggled medical appointments, home care, and work. It was exhausting, but it was my way of giving back for everything they had done for me. Despite that, I felt a lack of support, especially from my family. I informed my parents about the situation, but they showed no interest in helping. "We're too busy right now," my mom replied. Emily, as always, was completely absent. It was during one of those hospital visits that a doctor mentioned something that shook me deeply. He suggested considering professional assistance for my grandparents, given the increasing severity of their care needs. That felt like a defeat, but James reminded me that doing what was best for them didn't mean I had to shoulder it all alone. With that in mind, I began looking for options that could provide the support they needed. In the meantime, I received another unexpected message from Emily. This time, it was more direct. "I heard our grandparents are having issues. If you need financial help, I can contribute, but only if you resolve things with Mom and Dad first." The cynicism in that message was enough to reignite all the anger I had suppressed. I didn't respond. Instead, I talked to my grandparents about the situation, and, as always, they reassured me. "We know you care, dear. The rest, let it go." Even so, the emotional weight began to build. My parents remained distant, Emily only reached out to reaffirm her moral superiority, and my grandparents, the anchor of my life, were aging before my eyes. Amid all this, James was my pillar, but I knew I was reaching my limit. Things came to a head when, during a medical appointment, my grandfather held my hand and said, "Don't worry so much, dear. You've done more for us than anyone could imagine. We love you for that, but you need to live your life too." Those words hit me as a reminder that I couldn't carry the weight of all this pain alone. It was then that I decided to contact an elderly care service, and with their help, we created a plan that balanced their needs with my mental health. At the same time, I started opening up more about my journey with my friends and in therapy. It was liberating to realize that I wasn't alone. My friendships became an even stronger support network, and slowly I began to feel like I was in control of my life again. But the world turns, and I knew Emily and my parents wouldn't stay quiet for long. They always found a way to resurface, and while I was feeling stronger, I knew the next confrontation would be inevitable. Months after organizing care for my grandparents, I started to feel that finally, things were falling into place. They were receiving the necessary support, and I could split my time between visiting them regularly and building a fulfilling life alongside James. But as expected, the silence from Emily and my parents didn't last long. One morning, while I was at home, I received an unexpected call from my mother. It was rare to hear her voice, especially without warning. "We need to talk. It's urgent," she said in a tone that made me uneasy. Before I could ask why, she continued, "Your grandfather told us something. We need to resolve this as a family." My heart raced. There was a note of panic in her voice, but also something that felt like anger. Without providing details, she insisted that I attend a meeting at Emily's house that night. Reluctant, and perhaps driven by a mix of curiosity and concern, I agreed. I told James where I would be and asked him to meet me later in the day, should anything go wrong. When I arrived, I was greeted with tense looks. Emily, my parents, and even my grandfather were there. The atmosphere was suffocating. As soon as I sat down, my mother got straight to the point. "Why didn't you tell us about the plans to put your grandparents in a nursing home?" I was confused. I explained that it wasn't exactly that. It was about additional support to ensure their well-being, something that was already working quite well. But my explanation was interrupted by Emily. "That's typical of you," she began, with a sarcastic smile. "Pretending to do something altruistic, but really wanting to control everything, and now you're trying to separate them from us." The hypocrisy in her accusation hit me like a slap. She had never cared about our grandparents, and now she was using the situation to attack me. It was at that moment that my grandfather intervened. With a calm but firm voice, he said, "This has already been decided, and it was the best choice for us. If you really cared, you would be here helping instead of judging." The silence that followed was crushing. For the first time, I saw my parents and Emily at a loss for words in the face of his unwavering wisdom. But the real shock came soon after. My grandfather, visibly tired, looked directly at me and said, "The truth is, this family has been living lies for far too long." He paused and took a deep breath before continuing. "There's something you need to know, and perhaps this explains why things have always been so difficult for you." He revealed, with a painful tranquility, that my mother had become pregnant with me during an extramarital affair. When my father found out, he decided to accept the situation to save face, but that was never forgotten. Emily, being the legitimate biological daughter, was the living proof of their marriage, while I became a constant reminder of my mother's mistake. The room fell into complete silence. My mother began to cry, while my father stared at the floor, unable to meet my gaze. Emily, instead of showing surprise, seemed uncomfortably aware of the truth. "You always knew, didn't you?" I asked her, trying to control the whirlwind of emotions forming inside me. She didn't respond, but her silence was answer enough. I stood up, feeling the weight of years of rejection finally making sense. "So that's it," I said, my voice steady despite the pain. "I never stood a chance, did I? No matter what I did, I would always be the intruder." My grandfather tried to console me, but I knew I needed to leave. When I got home, James was waiting for me, as promised. Upon hearing what had happened, he embraced me without saying a word. For the first time, I felt I had permission to completely break down. The pieces of the puzzle finally fell into place, and although the truth was devastating, it also brought an unexpected clarity. In the days that followed the revelation, the whirlwind of emotions gave me no respite. I felt relief from finally understanding the truth, but the pain of rejection over so many years continued to throb within me. More than ever, I knew I needed to find my own path, away from the ties of that family that had never truly seen me. Still, the wound was open, and reconnecting with myself would be a process. James, always patient and loving, helped me face the toughest days. "You don't have to carry this alone," he told me one night as I shed tears that seemed endless. "You always thought you needed to be strong to be accepted, but now it's time to be strong for yourself. And I'm here, right beside you." His words made me reflect. For the first time, I allowed someone to share the burden I had carried alone for so long. I began to write about my feelings, a practice recommended by my therapist. Each filled page seemed to lift a little of the weight off my shoulders, as if I were pulling stones out of myself and placing them into words. Moreover, caring for my grandparents continued to be a source of comfort and purpose. Despite the growing difficulties, each visit to their home was a vivid reminder of unconditional love. One afternoon, while helping my grandfather organize some papers, he unexpectedly clasped my hand tightly. "I'm so sorry for never telling you before," he began, his voice broken with emotion. "I thought I was protecting you, but now I see that it only hurt you more. You need to know that you were never a mistake. To us, you've always been the greatest blessing." His words warmed something inside me that I thought was lost. I hugged my grandfather, feeling that even amidst the pain, his love was something I could carry with me for the rest of my life. It was in this rediscovery of who I was that I received an unexpected message from Emily. This time, it was different. "I want to apologize to you," she wrote. "I did know about everything, but I never knew how to handle it. I think I felt threatened, and instead of trying to understand, I did everything I could to push you away. I hope you can forgive me one day." I read and reread those words several times. Part of me wanted to believe her, but another part knew I wasn't ready to open that door again. It was a dilemma. Could I trust her after everything I had lived through? However, James's words echoed in my mind. "You don't have to carry this alone." After days of reflection, I decided to respond. I was honest. "Thank you for acknowledging what happened. It takes courage to admit this. But for now, I need time to process everything. Who knows, maybe in the future we can talk more calmly. For now, I want to focus on what lies ahead." Her response was simple. "I understand. I'm here when you're ready." For the first time, I felt there might be a possibility for a different relationship with Emily, but it would be something that only time and consistency could build. With my parents, things were different. After sending that final email to them, explaining that I now knew the truth and saw no reason to keep in touch, part of me hoped for some response, perhaps an apology or a late acknowledgement. But nothing came. Their silence confirmed that I had made the right choice. James, always by my side, suggested we celebrate this new chapter of our lives. We decided to take a small trip, something simple yet meaningful. We chose a place I had always wanted to visit, a cottage surrounded by mountains and silence. It was there, under a starlit sky, that I realized how much I had grown. For so long, I thought I needed their love to feel whole, I confessed to James. But now I realized that I already had everything I needed. It was here all along, with you, with my grandparents, with the people who truly care. He smiled, holding my hand. "And now you can move forward, not because they gave you what was missing, but because you chose to stop seeking something that never came." Back to our routine, I began to focus on new projects. I enrolled in a creative writing course, something I had always wanted to do, but never had the courage for. James encouraged me to try, and soon I discovered that writing was a way to transform my pain into something meaningful. My stories began to come to life, inspired by the lessons I learned along the way. Additionally, I strengthened my friendships, creating a support network that helped me continue to evolve. Each day, I felt like I was rebuilding the idea of family, not through biology, but through love and the choices we made together. My grandparents continued to be my foundation, even in their fragility. One afternoon, while we were in the garden, my grandmother, who sometimes lost herself in her own thoughts due to dementia, had a remarkable moment of clarity. She held my face between her hands and said, "You are strong, much stronger than you think. Never forget that." Those words stayed with me. They became my mantra in moments of doubt. Today, as I look back, I see a journey marked by challenges, but also by quiet victories. I've learned that family isn't just those who share our blood, but those who choose to walk alongside us with love and respect. I've learned to set boundaries and prioritize my peace. Most importantly, I've learned that I am worthy of love, even when those who should have loved me fell short. James, my grandparents, and the friendships I've built are living proof that happiness is possible, even after years of pain. And what about the past? It still exists, but it no longer defines me. Now, as I write my own story, both literally and metaphorically, I feel that I am finally free. If you enjoyed this heartfelt story, don't forget to hit like, subscribe to the channel, and share your thoughts in the comments. What did you think of the story? Have you experienced something similar or know someone who has? Let's talk. Your engagement means a lot and motivates me to share more stories like this.